Gentlemen,
That's our stuff.
it's 7:03 PM,
I can't-
and I'm going to call
I need a little trigger to remember.
October 18th, 2022 meeting of the Hamilton Planning Board to order. We have an important agenda this evening. We have a bond release request from Canterbury Capital LLC, and we intend to discuss in detail potential amendments to the General Town Bylaw, Chapter 29, Stormwater Management.
Marnie,
And,
excuse me, can you speak into the microphone? I don't know if anybody else can't hear you, but I can't very well.
Okay.
Okay.
And we also intend to discuss some matters regarding the Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary and other board business. So we'll start with roll call, and when I call your name, would you please indicate that you're present? Jonathan Poor,
Present.
Bill Wheaton,
Present.
Emil Dahlquist,
Present.
Richard Boroff,
Present.
Beth Herr,
Present.
Pat Norton,
Present.
and Marnie Crouch present, and Patrick Reffert has advised me that Rick Mitchell will not be attending the meeting this evening. So before we begin our agenda, at the last meeting, right before the meeting, I got an email from Corey Beaulieu indicating that he was resigning as an associate member of the planning board, and I wanted to go on record to thank him for his service as an associate member. He was a valued member, but did not run for re-election, but he did serve as an associate member of the planning board and did serve an important function by attending all the remaining hearings on the 133 Essex project. So if in fact he had been needed, he would have been eligible to vote. So I wanted to go on record of thanking him for his service.
So Marnie, how do we go about replacing him?
Well, we would need to have another associate member, and if you know someone who would be interested, encourage them to apply, and that goes for everyone here. So I don't have a magic wand. I know we have many vacancies on our board, so, but having another associate member certainly would be helpful. So, as I said, the first order of business is a bond request by Canterbury Capital LLC. Ms. Mann, are you here via Zoom?
What did you say?
I believe Jill Mann is spearheading this bond release request.
She's on the phone, on the very bottom.
Is her here?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Oh, okay. You know what? I didn't realize. I thought I had unmuted myself, and I think I remuted myself. I apologize to the board. So this is Jill Mann in attendance, yes.
Yes, please, Ms. Mann, you may proceed with your request. It's my understanding you're seeking the release of the remaining amount of the bond in the amount of $9,159.
Yes, correct. On behalf of Canterbrook Capital Partners, I am here to request a release of that amount, and in support of that request, I had delivered to the board copies of a certification from the civil engineer, Meridian Engineering, as well as a plan demonstrating compliance with the approved plans, construction of all infrastructure, basically in compliance with those plans. And in addition to that, it's my understanding that Mr. Reffett did attend a site inspection that was conducted by Tom Schlosser, who is the on-site supervisor for Canterbury.
Well,
So based on all of that information, we're here to request a release of that final balance, which is $9,000 and change that's being held in cash.
right, and I reviewed your paperwork, and I found it to be in order. And Mr. Reffert, do you want to report about your inspection?
Yeah, about 5 weeks ago, Tom Schlosser and I walked the site. As you might recall, there were some landscape items that were remaining particularly some larger trees, as well as some trail work and some clearing here and there, a tiny bit of grading that needed to be redone, that we withheld funds for when they came into us. I believe that was in April. But I walked the site with Tom. They were all consistent with the plan, so thumbs up.
Okay, well, with that said, we don't need to drag this out. I will entertain a motion to grant the request of Canterbrook Capital LLC to release the balance of the bond in the sum of $9,159, and in conjunction with that, to authorize me to execute the disbursement certificate under the tripartite agreement.
Madam Chair, I believe we have a question.
Oh,
I don't want to slow it down. It looked like I happen to live across the street. I'm actually not here for this, at 16 Gale. But I'm curious, is there any screening between the new buildings and Highland Street? Was that part of the plan?
which new buildings? The Canterbrook buildings? Well, I would imagine that whatever is there is what the screening is between the buildings and
I didn't know if that,
and
Highland Ave, yeah.
between the buildings and Asbury Street, not Highland Street.
there's nothing between.
Well, I don't believe that the project extends as far as Highland Street.
Right, that's correct. It did not, and there's other private property with other private property owners toward Highland.
Right. I know those two residents, I believe they're owned by the same individual, and she has constructed an indoor arena. So yes, that was never part of the Canterbrook site.
Just curious about it. Yep.
Okay. Should I repeat what I just said for purposes of the motion?
Please.
It is a motion to grant the request of Canterbrook Capital LLC to release the balance of the bond in the sum of $9,159 and to authorize me to execute the disbursement certificate under the tripartite agreement.
I make a motion to grant the request of Canterbrook LLC to release the balance of the bond in the amount of $9,951.
Do I have a second?
I think it was 9,100.
150.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
And also to authorize me to execute that
In
certificate.
order to authorize and execute the release.
Second.
The second? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Jonathan Poor,
Aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Aye.
Richard Boroff,
Aye.
Beth Herr,
Aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. So it's the motion carried, and I will execute the disbursement certificate, and Ms. Mann, you should have your funds in short order.
Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's time this evening. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night, Joe.
Could you pass that down, and and Patrick will have it.
Bill.
Okay, so now we can turn to stormwater management.
To Patrick.
So I hope everyone had an opportunity to read our general bylaw, chapter 29, and really review it for any kind of deficiencies in it, any ways we can clarify it, make it stronger. I had a number of changes to it, and I believe Emil did as well. So what I was thinking is that we could go through each section and discuss each section, unless anybody...
Which are, who's who?
Who's who? I think Emil is the red line version. I did not actually do a red line version. I just used red font. Mine has a comment, a long footnote on the first page. That's my comment.
Okay.
Okay. So, did anyone have anything, any larger comments to say about the stormwater management bylaw, or should we just jump right in, and after we go through each section, then evaluate it as a whole?
This is the one with all the corrections and changes?
Yes, if it has a footnote at the bottom, that's mine, and if it is redlined with different formatting, notations in the margin, that's Emil's.
Then I'm going to make a suggestion, a request, that we take this home and look at it until the next meeting, because there's an awful lot of detail here. And I feel like there's too much detail here to make a decision tonight.
We're not making any decisions tonight about any amendments to this bylaw. It's a general discussion.
Okay,
so
fine.
that we
That-
can
I apologize.
familiarize ourselves with the issues.
That's fine.
And,
That's fine.
This is not going to be a quick
not gonna vote on
process.
it.
No,
Thank you.
no.
That's
no.
fine. I don't care about it.
No, it's much too important, and there's a lot of information in this.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
So we need to proceed carefully. So it looks to me like Emil has an edit that precedes mine. So do you want to perhaps read what your first suggestion is, Emil?
Page 1 of 12. This is information, incidentally, that I picked up. It's an annotated stormwater management, model stormwater management regulation for the state of Massachusetts. And it looked as though pretty much the language and all of the definitions is exactly the same as in this code, but there were some sections that were eliminated. So this is not original information from me. This is from a standard from the EPA, EPA.gov website.
When you're ready.
The purpose and intent, what I did was add to the beginning, which was the purpose and intent of this bylaw are to, and then it listed A through F. What I added was a general statement about the purpose and intent to protect, maintain, and enhance public health, safety, environment, general welfare by establishing minimum requirements and procedures to control the adverse effects of increased runoff, decreased groundwater recharge, erosion and sedimentation, and non-point source pollution associated with new development and redevelopment of land pursuant to Hamilton Stormwater Management Bylaws and Stormwater Management Permit Rules Regulations. Then in addition to specifically, and then it goes to what was there in the Stormwater Management, Chapter 29. So that was so it was an elaboration on the purpose and intent from what was there.
And what I did is, I thought there was a certain redundancy in the purposes and intent, so I eliminated what was the fourth purpose, to ensure that soil erosion and sedimentation control measures and stormwater runoff control practices are incorporated into the site planning and design process and are implemented and maintained. I thought that was relatively redundant, so I eliminated that. And then I specifically referenced throughout my edits to this bylaw the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook. And so I referenced environmentally sensitive site design and also the use of low-impact development techniques rather than practices. And then I deleted to the maximum extent practicable, but I don't actually have a problem with that, provided it is defined. And actually, in the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook, there is a definition of to the maximum extent practicable that's used for standard 3, but it could be incorporated and used whenever that phrase appeared. So,
I would support keeping that in there and defining it.
and then, as you can see in the, what's now the fifth purpose, I think the purposes and intent was to comply with state and federal statutes and regulations relating to stormwater discharges, including the Massachusetts Stormwater Policy. And the guidance for that is set forth in the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook, and I wanted to include that specifically. So the policy does include that, but you have to read it to discern that, and I wanted to make it specific.
Could I back up just a minute, Marnie?
Sure.
Do you mind if we comment as you go?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay. So in eliminating D as redundant, I agree that most of it's redundant except for are implemented and maintained. And so I think it's important not to lose that concept of maintained.
So would
Been
you
maintained.
keep that? Would
You could combine them. You could combine them into one statement rather than two overlapping statements.
So you would put it with what is now the ensure the use of environmental sensitive plan, the one below it?
No, the one,
What-
B.
let's see. Erosion, no, it would go with B,
It would go with B?
yes. You know, that's just a thought. But I think to delete the maintained is an important omission.
Yeah, that's what I said. That's what I meant, Jonathan.
Yeah, I support
Because
that.
B and D are redundant, except for D adds implemented and maintained. And then getting environmentally sensitive site design in there covers the site planning and design process, which is, so in a sense, if you kept D, it's overlapping B and the new D. And so what would be good to do, I think, is leave your site planning in the new D and get, you know,
Somehow add
implemented and maintained back up into B. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Which of these things is not like the other? So
Jonathan, you want to put, can you take your mask off when you're speaking? Because I can't understand what you're saying.
certainly. So Marnie, maybe you can repeat back what you heard.
Oh, well, we're going to keep our implemented and maintained and add that somehow to the second purpose, B.
Yep.
Take it
And,
up to B, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay,
but we'll
thanks.
have to correct the verbiage.
Yes. We don't need to do that now. It's just concepts.
Right. Okay. And so,
And then I had a comment that
okay,
you eliminated the term site planning under D, but you reinstated it under environmentally sensitive site design, which implies site planning.
right,
So you covered it.
right,
So it's just an observation,
right, right.
just so that people aren't
'Cause this came
concerned that concepts were deleted.
But here.
Okay,
Exactly.
I see what you're saying. I
And
see what he's saying. Yeah,
what-
thank you.
what we'll do is we'll create a new draft and then
Look at it again.
consider that.
Yep.
And what I started to do, and I didn't have an opportunity to really develop any ideas from my research, but I looked at stormwater bylaws from Wenham, Topsfield, and Ipswich. And so it's rather informative to look at the stormwater bylaws from other towns. And so if we do that, I mean, we may go to a third, fourth draft. So really, these are preliminary observations. I don't want anybody to think that what we do tonight is cast in concrete. It's really just to get some ideas out on the table. But, so now we can go to definitions. And Emil, you had a new definition, administrative land disturbance review. Approval by the Stormwater Authority of a land disturbance activity that does not require a land disturbance permit because of its size and/or scope. So what?
So that is anything that's not, anything that doesn't require a permit under applicability is,
This goes,
Patrick is going to share his wisdom?
this will make more sense when we get to applicability, I think, because instead of using the 1 acre trigger point, there's different wording there that makes a distinction between a smaller and a larger project. And so the idea here is to, these words are used in the smaller project, administrative land disturbance review, which doesn't require a full permit based on the size of the project and so forth.
What does that require? I mean,
Maybe
that creates,
Maybe when we get to it, we'll see that, but, or we can go there now if you like.
Well, look, maybe we should get back to it, but are you suggesting that whenever anybody disturbs land, they come in and just kind of indicate whether they're actually going to need a permit or not? Is this like an A&R, if you will?
It could be, I guess it could be an administrative decision and not go through the full permitting based on square footage of disturbance and so forth, like under a half acre. So again, I think it'll make more sense later if we come back to it.
Okay.
no, it makes sense. I just don't know what an administrative review will entail.
Right. Let's go
I
back
mean,
to it.
I'm happy with the idea of sort of dividing this into two things.
Yeah,
But I want to make sure that administrative review is, I
sufficient.
just don't, how tough is it going to be? Who's
Right.
going to do it?
Right.
It's just sort of,
Right.
Yeah.
What happens if all you're doing is adding to your driveway? What happens if all you're doing is, some yard work? We need to have some thresholds.
There are a list of exceptions or exemptions from it, so that's in
yeah,
here.
but again, it's not a question of applicability, it's a question of who's saying this and who's advising who.
Well, it's applicability as well as the parties.
Let's just wait and see how this
Okay.
plays out. You know, it may make more sense, but,
So in other words, if it's well enough defined, you might not need an arbiter,
yeah.
is the
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have another definition, Emil?
This is one I added because, basically because of even some recent experiences, but alterations of drainage characteristics. As a definition, any activity on an area of land that changes the water quality, force, direction, timing of location, or of runoff flowing from the area. Such changes include change from distributed runoff to confined or discrete discharge, change in the volume of runoff from the area, change in the peak rate of runoff from the area, and change in the recharge to groundwater on the area. Again, it's just an elaboration on terminology that can be used further in the document.
I don't think you can argue in the definition of what you've described, it's just how you apply it. You know?
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
all these definitions, they apply,
Yeah,
it's accurately defined,
yeah.
it's just,
the
How
one.
do they
When-
play out in the document? What's the concern that's being
Yeah.
addressed?
Yeah, so holding that in abeyance, if we were to adopt something like this is micro management, but just while we think of it,
Right.
what you might add to that list is the word concentration.
Pardon me, what was,
Concentration to that list. And maybe we don't adopt this, maybe we do, but if we do adopt it, that one descriptor could be useful. It's sort of hinted at, but a little bit missing in the list.
Where would you put it, Jonathan?
Right, you could put it anywhere in the list of commas. Changes to water quality, force, concentration, direction, timing, direction.
Oh, it's a
Anywhere,
definition.
anywhere in that
Your
list.
Definition,
Yes.
okay.
right, we'll have to see how the definitions
And-
play out
yeah.
when we get to the,
And this may never get to prime time, but if it does,
Yeah.
that's a useful word.
Okay.
So I had some comments, not changes per se, with respect to best management practices. Stylistically, I made them plural. But I don't know if we want to amend this definition, add to it, or leave it alone. It might be something to consider to make the definition in our rules and regulations the same as in the bylaw. So in our rules and regulations, we have a slightly more expansive definition. And then we could also reference the Stormwater Handbook, which also has a lot of further references.
Can I make sort of a general process suggestion, which is, I think as we go through this, what's going to happen is there are going to be things that are going to come up as a general recommendation. There was a perfect example of one. Just generally, not just on this definition, but all the way through the bylaws, comparing similar information, similar definitions, similar statements, and making sure they're in alignment. That's almost a discrete task in stormwater. It's a discrete task in all of the bylaws. And what I'd love to do as we progress in these meetings is have almost a to-do list. We don't have to do it now. We don't have to do it this year. Just at some point that as a sort of a sweeping forward task, we use that as a discrete, do it as a discrete effort where you look for inconsistencies across the bylaws, where you have a similar definition that's out of sync or a similar process that's out of sync, and do that as a discrete task, but not right now.
Right, well, I
So
think
we
with
make
respect
a
to
to-do list,
I think
and that's
with
item one on the to-do list.
Yeah, I think with respect to stormwater, the definitions in the regulations should be the same as the definitions in the...
Absolutely agreed. And what I'm saying is I'm casting a broader net here and saying,
Yes,
as a task, not to do right now, but in the future, task one is to go through that cycle. And for now, we could just say stormwater. We compare and contrast all the things that are parallel and make sure they are indeed parallel and not contradictory.
no, I agree. So I think at a minimum, we should probably use the definition that appears in the rules and regulations as opposed to the one that's existing in the bylaw.
So just, we have this in the recording. Does somebody want to take notes of, I'm not trying to harp on this, but I just want to make sure we capture these things because I'm sure more are going to come up. Do you want me to make some notes
Oh,
of
sure,
of
yes, I
the
think we
to-do
should
list?
all make
The
notes.
to-do list. Okay.
So what do people think about that suggestion to make the definition that's in the bylaw amended to make it the same as the definition that appears in the
I think it's essential.
That appears in the what?
rules and regulations,
Okay.
which
Well,
I
if it's
had.
in the same document, it's got to be the same.
Well, no,
They're
I
not
mean, the
indi-
rules and regulations, the stormwater management rules and regulations are different
I understand what
than the
you're saying.
bylaw. But I think we should have the more expansive definition that appears in the regulations to be in the bylaw.
Yes.
And if we don't, you reference it immediately in that shorter definition to say, go look at the rules and regs, or vice versa, to get the full story. If
Right.
we're not going to repeat, then you at least reference.
Right, and I also think it's not a bad idea to reference the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook, which I have some typos in my edits. But we can throw that in and obviously take it out if it looks like it's too much of a treatise. And so, so I think we're on the same page with this. And then the common plan of development or sale. I think that my definition is probably not the one we should use. And Emil, I think, found,
What page are you on, Marnie, please?
we're on Emil's page 2 of 12 and on my second page, which I apologize for not
Okay, thanks.
renumbering. So,
Okay, yeah, common plan of development.
my definition, I think, is way too cumbersome. Emil, where did you find your definition?
Yeah, I searched, I found this one on a Law Insider website, where you can find out definitions, legal definitions, and there were literally 266 samples of common plan of development or sale. And I glanced through a lot of them, and this was one that I picked out as seemed to be applicable to some recent situations, and also, whether it's Bridge Street or other areas, but where I think it gives some clarity to what the definition really means. So you want me to read it?
I think you should read it, and then I also found a definition that is not totally dissimilar, and
Yeah.
I'll read mine as well, and we can
Okay.
discuss which would be more appropriate.
So the common plan of development, a site where multiple separate and distinct construction activities may be taking place at different times, on different schedules, and/or by different contractors, but still under a single plan. Examples include: 1, phased projects and projects with multiple filings or lots, even if the separate phases or filings lots will be constructed under a separate contract or by separate owners. For example, development where lots are sold to separate builders. 2, a development plan that may be phased over multiple years, but is still under a consistent plan for long-term development. And 3, projects in contiguous area that may be unrelated, but still under the same contract, such as construction of a building extension, new parking lot at the same facility. If the project is part of a common plan of development or sale, the disturbed area of the entire plan shall be used in determining permit requirements.
Okay.
I think this is very good, but I don't think it handles the question of Bridge Street. Because Bridge Street is not a plan for development. It was a filing of a series of A&Rs. And if you consider that a common plan, then that's what the bylaw covers. The issue is whether that constitutes a common plan. And so later on in applicability, I list that as very explicitly as one of a series of uses on land that constitutes the triggering of the permit.
Well, Emil, I appreciate your effort here, but I think this is maybe a little cumbersome, but I found a definition, and this definition, it pertains to a Massachusetts MS4 general permit. Perhaps, Pat, you know more about this than I do, but this would be part of the NPDES system. So if you were obligated to have a SWEP, this definition of common plan of development appears in an Appendix A with respect to the requirements for the EPA's construction, general permit, and that type of thing. So the question I was searching, I wanted to know when a SWEP was required. And I came across something on the Commonwealth's website, it says, is your construction site greater than 1 acre, or is it part of a common development plan that is greater than 1 acre? So that's something that language is used with respect to
Isn't that the current language?
EPA's construction general permit and the NPDES system. So that definition, then, I will read it. And so this is something now that the EPA uses, and concomitantly, the Massachusetts uses this definition as well. So this is common plan of development. It doesn't include sale, but it says, a larger common plan of development or sale, oh, it does say sale, is a contiguous area where multiple separate and distinct construction activities may be taking place at different times on different schedules under one plan. For example, if a developer buys a 20-acre lot and builds roads and installs pipes and runs electricity with the intention of constructing homes or other structures sometime in the future, this would be considered a larger common plan of development or sale. If the land is parceled off or sold and construction occurs on plots that are less than 1 acre by separate independent builders, this activity would be subject to stormwater permitting requirements if the smaller plots were included on the original site plan. So then the question is, which definition is more clear? And more importantly, do either definitions capture really what might be happening on Bridge Street? And I think as a practical matter, we probably can all agree that there's probably a common plan of development and sale on Bridge Street. But if when you were reading the stormwater management bylaw, you may have noted that there was no enforcement provision specifically relating to the common plan of development or sale. It just referenced if the site was over an acre. Kind of a real hole in the bylaw. So I don't know if our existing bylaw captures a failure to obtain a permit if there's a common plan of development or sale. That's a legal question, and maybe town council could weigh in on that. But when I read the bylaw, when I initially read it, I noted it, and when I read it again, I also observed that there was no specific enforcement reference with respect to the common plan of development or sale. But if you see, Patrick gave us the ownership of the 9 lots, not Bridge Street, but I think we know that Summit Development owns 0 Bridge Street if it hasn't been sold. It may have been sold. But you see that Summit Development owns, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those lots, and then this Dan Bander owns 3. So there's clearly some commonality on Bridge Street.
I would have to agree with Bill's comment that a series of A&Rs creates a potential loophole here, and so you kind of need to address that somehow, and I'm not sure how.
I would be very explicit under applicability and say something like, that results in land disturbances equal to or greater than 1 acre from an approved subdivision, from a single lot of less than 2 acres, from a series of lots created with A&Rs adjoining a common road, approved road, any commercial non-residential development. So you just list out all the things you could do with the land. Now that doesn't, I can see Emil's point, which is that you subdivide the land and then you have 10 different builders, each one coming in. So you're not granting 1 permit for a plan, you're granting 9 permits. Because and that's kind of the tricky thing. So you have to explicitly say, to cover that, I think, that this is a permit given to this lot, but because this lot meets certain characteristics, then you have to have a permit. Even if we have to grant 9 of them, which seems very inefficient relative to granting one for the whole 9 lots, we need to be really explicit about that.
Well, actually, I don't think it would be inefficient, because if you've got 9 different, if you've got 9 different lots of whatever size with 9 different builders, they're all going to do something different. So I think there should be 9 different permits.
Yes, I'm just saying that you have to string them together in totality, but in order to do that...
I don't agree with you. I don't think they should be in totality.
No,
They're individual.
it's not that they should be, there should be a separate permit, but they must come under the permit review because they're part of this plan, the development. But that, rather than getting into a long debate about what constitutes a plan and development, it was just listed out.
Yeah,
Well-
just eliminate the whole reference to common plan of development and sale. Just eliminate that.
Part of the definition would be if the sites are all sold at the same time, something along like this. Sites are all sold at the same time, but they're sold to 9 or 10 different people. They've got a right to do individually what they want to do and not be constricted by something that applies to guy number 1, doesn't apply to guy number 9. So I'm not
Right,
sure
but
which...
so I agree, they need 9 permits and all of the advice and rules and regs that'll come from a permit, but they can't escape the permit by
Right.
saying that they came underneath some aggregate level because they only cleared 3/4 of an acre.
But would anybody do that? If I were building a thing, if I were a builder and taking 1 lot out of 9 and building on that, I wouldn't want to be involved with the other 8 people.
Oh, I
Why would
see,
you
I
do
see
that?
what you're saying. So the first guy can say, because the other 8 lots have not had a plan and have not been permitted, we don't know how much land they're planning to clear. So how can you hold me accountable for the 1 acre rule when, they could be building a park next door for all I know? And therefore, my 1 lot, which has 0.9 acres of, 1 acre of clearing, is fine, because I don't know what they're going to do.
I get that, but I think something's confusing here, and I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing. I'm not sure where reality is here with this
Well,
discussion.
you know what, my
I
suggestion...
mean, that's why Emil had some of this discussion about
Yeah.
timing
Yeah.
and phasing, that would still
I found
constitute...
I found something in the Stormwater Management, Volume 1, the standards, Chapter 1. It's on page 3, and it's under applicability. Stormwater Management standards shall apply to the maximum extent practicable to the following. And item 3 says, housing development and redevelopment projects comprised of detached, single-family dwellings on 5 to 9 lots, provided there is no stormwater discharge that may potentially affect a critical area. So it does cite a project of naming the number of lots, giving
Yeah, but
lots.
then you get back to the same A&R problem. This is not a development. It's 9 owners. They each want to do their own thing. And you can't even prove, you can't say to the first guy, I'm going to, I'm going to hold you into account because all the land together constitutes much more than an acre. And he'll say, well, wait a minute. I'm the first guy. We don't know what the other 8 guys are going to do. They could turn it into a park.
You know, what I'm thinking here is that this whole concept of a common plan of development might be a red herring, and we should just address each, the stormwater management permit per lot, depending on the nature of the lot, and
Yeah,
not...
and if it's a single lot, but it's got other lots next to it, whether they be part of a planned subdivision, or whether they just be A&Rs strung out on the street.
Doesn't matter.
Too bad, if you're the one A&R there, it's too bad, you're gonna have to come in under stormwater. You just don't
Right.
say that.
And so we don't have to, we don't actually have to tie the requirement for a permit to 1 acre. In Wenham, they just say you need one. If you're disturbing land, you need a permit. And so, and then in Topsfield, it's interesting, they have, the way they do their stormwater applicability, they carve out, they have exceptions for lot sizes that are smaller and don't have steep slopes. But if it's a little bit larger and has steep slopes, then you need a permit. So they just look at each individual lot and forget this whole common plan of development or sale, which is, no matter what definition you use, someone could weasel
That's
out
true,
of it.
that would be a way around this.
Just get around it. Don't even try and define it. Just define the nature
Size
of
and
the
how much
lot.
clearing is going to occur under
Yeah.
each circumstance.
And it doesn't have to be an acre, and it could be an acre, but it's flat. It could be small, but it could have very steep slopes. And so, they're all different permutations that you can use. But if you have really well-drained soil and a flat lot that's not near any water course, I mean, why would you really need a stormwater management permit? But if you have, like the lots on Bridge Street that are quite steep, that have the potential to drain, have runoff into the Miles River, well, of course, that's another story.
Well, then that would tie very closely, have to tie very closely with Emil's administrative review. So you would set out a series of criteria, and then when you went over the criteria, you came under review, and you came under permit when you went under the criteria, then you come under
Who would
administrative
come in
review.
and say, I'm exempt? I don't
Yeah,
have
you
to
say,
do
I
that."
want to be exempt, and Patrick would say, well, if you're extending your driveway only, so many feet, that exempts you.
Yeah.
My general observation is that other towns and municipalities have lower thresholds than Hamilton. This is a pretty high threshold, and just addressing the thresholds in a more sensible way, I think, could make this better.
And kind of just go beyond this common plan of development and
Yes,
sale. Just-
yes. Get into the environmental considerations.
And then
For example-
under applicability, we would have administrative review for people that were under the thresholds.
Yeah,
and
that's
permit
what
review.
I've got. When we get to that, I'll go
Oh,
over
okay.
those.
All right, so let's
Maybe we should delegate for next meeting to come up with the combination of size and slope, that no matter where the lot is, you have to meet that criteria.
Yeah, so let's just kind of put this, except if it shows up in Emil's applicability section. But let's just put that aside, because that can really hold us up. And so, Emil, you have disturbance of land. And I think I inadvertently crossed out land disturbance activity, but neither here nor
They're both
there.
the same. I use the same definition for both, but I thought there should be clarity because during the presentation on the Bridge Street, the attorney indicated, I guess it was the attorney, that cutting a tree down does not constitute a disturbance. Grubbing it does, because there's change in the soil, change in the grading and so forth. But
What is grubbing?
taking the stump out, pulling the stumps out, which disturbs, of course, the land.
There's a definition, and whoever did this one, on page 3, there's a definition of grubbing. Third thing down.
So grubbing is equivalent to clearing?
That was in our bylaws. It said the act of clearing land surface by digging up roots and stumps.
Okay.
What I wrote on disturbance of land again is, any action that causes a change in position, location, or arrangement of soil, sand, rock, gravel, or similar earth material results in an increased amount of runoff or pollutants, measurably changes the ability of a ground surface to absorb waters, involves clearing and grading, or results in an alteration of drainage characteristics.
I like that.
Just a question of applying that to a situation, like if you stripped your lot of the loam and re-loamed or sieved and reseeded and, you know, does that classify then as a disturbance of land in this definition, I guess?
Again, I think they have exemptions, and one of them, the various ones, including road work, including, maintenance, and private, landscaping and so forth. I think those are all exemptions
Yeah.
to, certainly for a permit. But,
I mean, the only problem with the disturbance here is suppose I'm a developer and I'm cutting and grubbing, which is not in here. Okay, it's a rearranging of rock, soil, and sand. Maybe, but if I'm just cutting and grubbing, I'm trying to be argumentative, right? That would exempt me. And then we can get into a debate endlessly about whether all the changes I've made are actually going to result in an increased amount of runoff. I'm going to get the engineers in and do all their studies. Why don't we just say that anytime you change the arrangement, anytime you clear or grub land, change the soil, change the rock, change the gravel, you have disturbed the land.
But that's going to
Period. And
occur in
then-
every development.
What?
That's going to essentially occur in every development.
Yes, and then we're back to our threshold.
yeah, that's right, when we're up to
Then we're
applicability.
back to our thresholds.
Right,
If you're going
then
to,
it's
I
the
mean,
area. Yeah.
that certainly is a disturbance of land. I mean, I don't think here we should say, does it result in any adverse circumstances? That's what the permit's for. The permit is to
This
determine
is just the
that.
definition.
Yeah.
And if you reloam your lawn, that's not, that's going to be.
Yeah,
an
that's not
exception.
rearrangement, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is just a definition. It doesn't have,
Right.
in and of itself, have a consequence to it. The consequences are going to come from the definition of applicability
Yeah.
with the exemptions. These are just definitions. They don't actually have a consequence associated with them. So I actually like that definition that you've produced better than the one that, the one that's there is any activity that causes a change in the position or location of soil, sand, rock, gravel, or similar earth material. That's very similar to your first phrase.
Yeah.
Where are you reading, Marty, please?
So I really apologize for failing to number my pages. So it would be
Right here.
page 3.
She's reading that one.
Okay.
That's hers, yep.
So I think Emil's definition is the better of the two. It's more expansive, and I would propose using his definition rather than the one that was associated with land disturbance activity, as opposed to just the word disturbance.
Can I stop and ask an administrative thing for a second?
Sure.
Who wrote this one?
Emil.
Emil. Okay,
Not Marnie's.
and that's Marnie. Okay. So can people say which one they're referring to whenever you're making a statement? Because I'm lost half the time. When you just start talking, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure. Okay, so we can go, I added, I got disturbance out of order, sorry. I added a definition for environmentally sensitive site design.
A definition for what?
Environmentally sensitive site design.
Thank you.
Should I read it? And I took this from the,
Marnie, what's non-point source pollution?
You're going to find out in a minute.
Okay?
Okay.
Further down.
So environmentally sensitive site design is design that incorporates low-impact development techniques to prevent the generation of stormwater and non-point source pollution by reducing impervious surfaces, disconnecting flow paths, treating stormwater at its source, maximizing open space, minimizing disturbance, protecting natural features and processes, and/or enhancing wildlife habitat. And that comes from the Wetlands Regulations, 310 CMR 10.04, and Water Quality Certification Regulations, 314 CMR 9.02. And I believe that's quoted in the Stormwater Handbook, Volume 1, Chapter 1, on page 4. Comments on adding that definition?
That's great, and the question is there a way without sounding redundant to get in the idea of protected and unprotected natural features without using the word protecting too many times? Because if you study the state stormwater standards, they are explicit about differentiating between protected and unprotected natural features. It'd be lovely for it to be included in the definition, but it's not included in the definition from, where you pulled this. Yet it does show up frequently elsewhere in the state stormwater standards. And I'm just trying to figure out if there's a way to incorporate that without being clumsy or redundant.
There are actually regulated and unregulated.
There you go, there's the word.
That's the word that.
Yeah,
maybe-
so protecting regulated and unregulated natural features. Emil got it. There it is, done. Thank you. I couldn't remember what the word
Yeah.
was that didn't duplicate the word protecting.
So
There's
would
one other thing here that's
add it in
important.
there
So let's
somewhere?
let Marnie capture that for just a second. So have you got that?
I have it. Do you know where in the handbook that appears?
It appears many times. I can hunt for it right now if you'd like.
No,
It appears, I think, may appear both in Volume 1 and Volume 2, and it appears in the Sediment and Erosion Control Manual.
I could probably find it. And so you would
Well,
want to add
while I'm
that.
sitting and listening, I can look for places, so.
What I did is I took the handbook, and I don't know if any of you have done the same thing, but I took Volume 1, Chapter 1, and Volume 2, Chapter 1, and downloaded. It's a Word document, so that means you can actually use the word function find to find, the definition of whatever you want, or if you want to search environmentally sensitive site design, that will pop up everywhere it appears in those chapters. So, yeah, I could try and add that somehow, some way, whether it would, how it would flow. Remember that some of these things, might be better off in revised regulations than in the general bylaw. I mean, that's something to consider. We don't want to get too deep in the weeds in the general bylaw if regulations can actually address them perhaps better.
Then again, the trick is to link them better, because they're fairly weakly linked right now. Regs to bylaws and bylaws to
I'm not
regs.
saying that we can't include this,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying,
I agree, and so the task would be to make sure that the regs are more strongly linked to the bylaws.
that's the amendment to the regulations requires public hearings and notice and that kind of thing. Any amendment to the general bylaw and the regulations have to go to town meeting. Is that correct, Patrick? But amending the regulations is a more a heavier lift for the planning board than to amend the bylaw. So, but I can look into adding that in the definition of environmentally sensitive site design. So where are we?
Marnie,
Yes?
this is Robin from KP Law. Well, we can double check. I don't think your regulations need to go to town meeting unless you have some special requirement for that. Normally, the bylaws go to town meeting, the regulation just goes through the board's process.
Oh, but it does require a public hearing.
I will double check and take a look at what's needed for the stormwater regulations, but ordinarily regulations don't go to town meeting.
Oh, okay. But am I right, Patrick? Didn't we have public hearings when we amended the regulations last year? We did.
Yes, we did.
So I think the regulations do require public hearings. Whether they have to go to town meeting or not, I don't know. Probably not, because you didn't. They don't.
As a practice, regulations the board can do within a public hearing is posted for the statutory period, but bylaws
Have to go to
absolutely
town meeting.
rarely.
And they don't require a public hearing. Boy, is that a disconnect? A little bit of a disconnect.
The public going to town meeting would be the public hearing.
Right, I know, but I mean, there's nothing in
Yeah, I know-
advance
I
of
know
the
what you're
public
saying,
hearing,
yeah.
the way with the regulations. Okay, so the next, Emil, you have erosion and sedimentation control plan as the next definition.
Yeah, that was missing, I thought, but, and it is a document containing narrative, drawings, and details developed by a qualified professional engineer, PE, or a certified professional in erosion and sedimentation control, CPESC, which includes best management practices or equivalent measures designed to control surface runoff, erosion, and sedimentation during pre-construction and construction-related land disturbing activities.
Thoughts on that?
Again, it's a topic that I'm not sure exactly where this would come up, but, in relation to the stormwater management plan, but
Where it's just a definition, I don't think it harms anything. Again, there's
Yeah,
not
it's
an
just-
action associated with it or a
Right.
consequence.
Right, so I'd add it. What we'll do is we'll make these changes, and then we'll look at the document as a whole again and again. And if it doesn't add anything after we've gone through the whole process, we can always eliminate it. But for now, I think it's a good idea to add it. And then the next three new definitions are all thanks to Emil. So he has land disturbance activity, land disturbance permit, and lot. So could you explain the rationale for all of those?
well, land disturbing activity is identical to disturbance of land. Only because both are used in the document. And I don't think there's a distinction between the two. But land disturbance permit, a permit issued by Stormwater Authority pursuant to the Hamilton Stormwater Management Bylaw prior to commencement of land disturbing activity. So this would be a permit to engage, I guess, in the activity of disturbing the land.
So is your concept that everyone, every entity that engaged in land disturbance activity would have to have a land disturbance permit, and then a subset of that group would have to have a stormwater management permit?
Well, this becomes apparent in applicability number 2, which we'll come to, where it says a land disturbance permit is required for disturbance of 1/2 acre, 21,780 square feet, or more of land, or for the disturbance of any amount of land where the proposed use is a land use of higher potential pollutant loads pursuant to the Massachusetts Stormwater Management Standards. So it's under applicability is the reference,
Okay, so
or
we'll get
where
to
it's
that.
used. We'll get to that, yeah. And then lot, this, to me, seems to be something that is not well-defined. What is a lot? An individual tract of land as shown on the current assessor's map for which an individual tax assessment is made. For the purposes of these regulations, a lot also refers to an area of a leasehold on a larger parcel of land as defined in the lease agreement and shown by approximation on the assessor's map.
Okay, these are definitions. I have no problem adding them. So then the next change, for me, it was just, instead of referring to low-impact development, I referred to low-impact techniques. A development is not a set of strategies. Techniques are a set of strategies, so it was really more of a stylistic correction. But I did have a reference that could be made to the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook and the definition contained therein. So
We just have to make the changes wherever that low-impact development appears then in the
right,
document.
and I'm not sure I picked up on that, but
Yeah.
we can do that. So I'll leave that footnote in just for reference. The ultimate document we might want to eliminate those footnotes, but when we review this again, it might be helpful to have those specific references if we want to do any more revisions with respect to that definition. Oh, wait, let's see, I had a comment. Oh, so that, the rules and regulations use the same definition. I don't know if they refer to low-impact development for techniques. Double check. Yeah, they use the term development too, so let's think about that. Okay. So with respect to the Massachusetts stormwater policy, I included a sentence, the policy is implemented through the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook. Thoughts on including that in the definition?
Did the same people that wrote the policy write the handbook?
Yes, it's the Commonwealth.
Commonwealth, okay.
I support that. I support including it.
Yeah, I think it's good, too.
It's specifically stated either
Yeah.
in the handbook that it's implementing the
Yeah.
policy. So it just makes explicit what is stated there. Oh, here, this is the MS4 permit, look at that. Okay, so, Emil, you had another definition of non-point source pollution?
That's page 4 of 12, yeah. At the top of the page, non-point source, and then pollution is added. There is a couple of definitions down. There's the point source, but there is a non-point source, which is pollution from many diffuse sources caused by rainfall or snow melt moving over and through the ground. As the runoff moves, it picks up and carries away natural and man-made pollutants, finally depositing them into a water resource area.
So, Emil, just a minute question. If you go back and look at the definition, did it indeed say many versus any?
Pollution
Both.
from
And so in
Any.
other words, both of those could apply, and I'm just curious what Is there potentially a typo there, or that it was many?
I think that is the word many, but, so, any diffuse sources caused by rainfall?
I just sort of read it both ways as I just intuitively. Not a big,
Yeah,
but just.
either way. I mean,
Why don't you just say pollution from diffuse sources? Because many implies a quantity, and it could be 1 or 2 sources, and it could be 100 sources.
That's why I looked at it. That's what caught my brain there. Not a big deal, but a question.
Where did this definition come from? I mean,
Um, This came from the EPA standard that I referenced it on the first page, I think it was.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, the annotated stormwater management, model stormwater management regulation.
Okay, well, we can check.
A lot of the definitions were identical to what we have in our stormwater, so I believe this probably was the model that was used in originally developing the stormwater management chapter 29, because the wording is identical, but there were additional ones that I thought might want to be included that were left out. And a non-point source, because there is a point source definition just a couple of, little further down. The point source says, any discernible, confined, and discrete conveyance, including but not limited to any pipe, ditch, channel, tunnel, conduit, well, discrete fissure, or container from which pollutants are or may be discharged. So again, the distinction is it's a discrete as opposed to a general diffusion.
And the important distinction, just for folks who are not familiar with it, is because there's more velocity associated with a point discharge than a non-point discharge. That's why they're differentiated.
Mm.
And more velocity, the more potential damage.
So we agreed to add that definition?
I support this.
I had changes to the operation and maintenance plan, but now with the, I included a lot of information here, but I think that a reference to the rules and regulations probably would suffice. And I would have to double check our rules and regulations to make sure they require the same information that's set forth in the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook. So I can do that. And if by chance they're not in sync, then maybe I could leave that in, because those are the minimum requirements. Thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's useful to put in what should be required in there, as shall at a minimum include.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to study the regulations in more detail, but I don't know that they actually have this specific information. So I think it would be important to include that along with the reference to the rules and regulations.
Where are you, Marnie?
I'm on page 4.
Okay, yeah. Beth showed me.
And so I think the next definition is pollutant.
Yeah, this is mine at page 4 of 12. I mean, it may seem obvious, pollutant, but, I mean, it gives any element or property of sewage, agriculture, industrial, or commercial waste, runoff, leachate, heated effluent, or other matter, whether originating at a point or non-point source, that is or may be introduced into any sewage treatment works, watercourse, or waters of the Commonwealth, misspelled there, or typo. Pollutants include but are not limited to, and then it's A through L of sort of the standard pollutants. It's just a question whether there should be a definition of what is a pollutant.
Not a bad idea in my world. I think Wenham has a list of pollutants in their bylaw.
Is that the actual list under the Commonwealth guidelines?
It's under the model guidelines,
Model
yeah.
guidelines?
Yeah.
Why don't we just say that? Make the law briefer.
Yeah.
The list of pollutants in the
Yeah.
Commonwealth's guidelines, but not limited to.
Yeah.
The list from the Commonwealth's guidelines, included in the Commonwealth's guidelines, but not limited to.
Yeah, model stormwater management regulation.
That sounds like a good idea.
Okay.
Marnie, I think you skipped past your operation and maintenance plan.
Oh, I thought we were going to include the minimum requirements. So it says a long-term operation and maintenance plan shall at a minimum include stormwater management system owners, the party or parties responsible for operation and maintenance, including how future property owners will be notified of the presence of the stormwater management system and the requirement for proper operation and maintenance, the routine and non-routine maintenance tasks to be undertaken after construction is complete, and a schedule for implementing those tasks, a plan that is drawn to scale and shows the location of all stormwater BMPs in each treatment train along with the discharge point, a description and delineation of public safety features, and an estimated operations and maintenance budget. The operations and maintenance plan shall identify best management practices for implementing maintenance activities in a manner that minimizes impact to wetland resources. So that's directly from the Stormwater Handbook, Volume 1. And then I just included other information for my own edification and anybody else's who was interested. But those are the minimum requirements and probably should be in there.
Kind of off the subject, but on the subject, a question for rules and regs would be a little bit more detail about enforcement, of not maintaining.
Right.
And I don't, that's a pretty open subject, and maybe it's worth looking at other towns to see what they do.
Also, who would be doing the enforcement?
Yeah, all of that.
It's usually the local conservation commission, isn't it?
The local who?
Isn't it the conservation commission?
No, only if it comes into their jurisdiction, if it comes into their buffer zone or the resource area. But if it's outside the resource area, no.
Doesn't matter, huh?
And can we just go back to pollutants? Because on the one hand, Bill, I really, I appreciate your point, but it may be that some people wouldn't be able to find the model guidelines very easily, and I don't know that it's the worst thing in the world to include a list of pollutants.
Then the question would be, would it be in the rules and regs or the bylaws? And you reference it.
Right.
And you reference it from the bylaws. Keep the bylaws streamlined and then get more detailed and nuanced in the rules and regs, but again, link them strongly so that nobody forgets to read the rules and regs when they're applying.
Yeah, add the actual list to the regs.
Right, but reference it in the bylaw.
Right.
Get them there directly, so it's
We'd
not a
ha-
treasure hunt, no treasure hunts.
I don't know that they are in the regulations. Let's see. No. I'd have to read them carefully to see that, so we'll have to look at that. So then, Emile, you have priority habitat as a definition?
I'm just looking at our rules and regs, and I don't see pollution defined.
No, I didn't either, and,
I do see priority habitat of rare species in here, in the rules and regs, but it doesn't appear in the... The priority habitat of rare species, then, is habitats delineated for rare plant and animal populations protected pursuant to the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act and
I
its
think the only
regulations.
difference between what's there and in the bylaw currently is the reference to the actual act.
The
Right?
reference to what?
Right, right,
The actual act,
yes. Yeah, it's the identical,
MGH 131A.
yeah, it's identical wording.
So, do you mind if I jump off the subject into definitions in a broader sense? This is back to the to-do list. What I find a little peculiar in the bylaws in general is that the definitions are a bit scattered in concept. So some of them are contained in section 11 of the bylaw, and some of them are individually in the individual bylaws, but there's no, there's not much rhyme or reason to where they are. And I just wonder if that should be revisited. And many bylaws, they just have definitions, period. They're not scattered around, so you have to hunt for them. So it's not something to be discussed right now, but could we add it to the to-do list to discuss later?
Can you give
you better
an
keep that
example
to-do
of that?
list.
Well, I'm reading on page 2 of the bylaws, and it says definitions. The first letters of each word are, in defined terms in this bylaw, are capitalized. The definitions are found in section 11 of this bylaw. In some cases, definitions are grouped according to the section in which the term appears. So,
Oh,
so they're just sort of a
I
little
see.
bit
Yeah.
randomized.
Yeah.
So, is there a better way? And I know that also just in general, I had a project in Hamilton, and I asked one of my employees to, I think, look up floor area ratio or something basic, and it wasn't defined.
Right,
You
yeah.
know, so it just, it could use some tuning.
Oh, I think that, I apologize, but I had a question about defining pollution prevention plan, whether we want to include a definition of that and also when it may be required.
Is it only required when you're seeking a NIPD's permit, is it? Or
Actually, if there is a pathway for stormwater to flow from a site directly or indirectly to a water of the U.S., you will need to seek coverage under the EPA Construction General Permit, and then, so under the Construction General Permit, you will have to develop a stormwater pollution prevention plan that is implemented you just have to do that. So if the construction site, and this includes site preparation and clearing, is greater than 1 acre, or your development is part of a larger common development plan that is greater than 1 acre, and there's a pathway for stormwater to flow from the site directly to a water of the U.S., you need to have a SWIP. So I think that we should probably have that in there. At least it gives people a bit of notice that they might need one. Yes? So I'll try, for the next go-round, I'll try and find a suitable definition, and we'll just add that.
But I think you'd be looking, that's the applicability then to align with what you're defining under the stormwater prevention.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, that applicability is exactly what we have, right?
Right,
Everyone
but
can go
the
ahead.
applicability is going to be the really most difficult section to come up with, but we would have to then deal with that under applicability, along with all the other things. Okay. And then, Emil, you had a definition of stormwater authority?
What's with all the definitions, Steve?
Yeah, and I know this, the planning board is the
Oh,
stormwater.
there it's going?
No.
Permitting
Don't
authority.
do that. Are they playing tonight?
There's someone who should be
Over
on,
there?
is that what we're hearing?
Unfortunately, we can't mute people. So, I think it's, is it Stephen Jameson?
Just say
It's
something.
Philip Lake.
Philip Lake.
Is if Philip Lake is on, you please mute yourself.
No, whether that person.
Could the members of the public who are in attendance please mute themselves if they're not in a quiet situation? We don't have the ability to mute them.
I can try to walk in with these guys.
One shot, it's loose. Trevor takes it to the corner. Boyle stands up his man.
Getting a bonus.
Good God.
Please mute yourself.
Austin
We were doing.
past the deck.
My wife had
Moved by Wilson. Knocked down by Malcolm.
and she came up and started yelling at me.
So we don't have the capacity to mute
Oh
them.
my God.
For some reason, it looks like Marty was asking if they can mute. It's very strange that you can't.
Center in Ottawa.
They're back here
We
Thursday.
have distinctions between participants and listeners. A lot of webinars do. Is this a webinar? or what is it?
Just soon.
Zoom.
It's an executive meeting, so everybody can,
Regular meeting.
a regular meeting, not a webinar.
Patrick, can you try to claim host and log in with your credentials?
I'd have to stop to do that.
Like Myron and Hillary.
What we're talking about tonight, places to do, even if it's just a hard pass looking for a chip in the case, try to establish a fourth chip, finish your hit, flipped it, more than willing to do so. Kelly didn't like it, came right back out, flipped it, more than willing. Fucker Kelly thought it flipped it like a little too high with that shoulder and arm.
This is not that big.
Number 45, Boston number 75. Both players, 500 meters fighting. Establishing that team along the goal line, and I'm not sure if it took his eye off it or just a little misread, but it is right pad. Ralston trying to find his legs and his time. He come in on young talented team. Over the pack close.
Are you still talking?
Josh Stores.
People, are you still talking?
Yes.
It's like, what? No.
Somebody changed the coding.
I have his phone.
It appears Mr. Lake is muted now.
Okay, now we've lost some members. We can't seem to,
Marty, so who's the Stormwater Authority?
pardon me?
Who's the Stormwater Authority? Planning board?
Well, if you look
Nobody
at
else.
We're the permitting authority.
responsibility for administration, we're the permitting.
Permitting authority.
And we're responsible, it's the ZBA and the planning board are the planning authorities. And the entities charged with enforcement is a little more problematic, but we're not going to reach that today by any stretch. Well, I think we can proceed. I mean,
Looks like it's cleared up,
Mm-hmm.
one way or another.
is Pat,
Yeah, they're muted.
Okay.
where did Pat go?
Restroom.
What got you to come to the meeting?
What do you mean, oh, tonight?
Yeah. You usually just...
Well, I was on Zoom while you guys were doing your other.
Pardon me?
When you guys were doing your other thing.
Okay, we resume. So I think, Emil, you had some additional edits to redevelopment. You have additions.
Oh, yes, yeah. Yeah, the first sentence was the original, would remain, but then it's the creation of new areas of impervious surface or new areas of land disturbance on a site constitutes development, not redevelopment, even where such activities are part of a common plan, which also involves redevelopment. So redevelopment includes maintenance and improvement of existing roadways, including widening less than a single lane, adding shoulders, correcting substandard intersections, improving existing drainage systems and repaving, and remedial projects specifically designed to provide improved stormwater management, such as projects to separate storm drains and sanitary sewers, and stormwater retrofit projects.
Do you need all the examples? Because if by chance you left one out, somebody could say, well, that doesn't apply because it isn't in the examples. And just, the definition is broad, and that's fine.
Yeah, I think what it does is just kind of draws a distinction between development and redevelopment. Because the original one, development, rehabilitation, expansion, demolition, or phased projects that disturb the ground surface or increase the impervious areas on previously developed sites.
Well, the way to get around Richard's point, you could say includes,
But not limited to.
But not
yes,
Yeah.
but not limited to.
Or just say some examples are,
Includes activities such as, either of those works,
yeah, that's good, because that says it's not limited to.
exactly. And then
Okay.
you have an addition of the Stormwater Authority. Is that from the model?
Yeah, but it was fill in the blank. So who is the authority? We're the permitting authority, the ZBA and the planning board, right? I'm not sure. I don't know, maybe Patrick knows.
I would leave that blank for now.
Would you?
My suspicion is that would be DPW, because they deal with the drainage aspect of the town more than anybody else.
And Conservation Commission, I think legally is bound to stay in their jurisdiction.
Right,
Yeah.
Right.
exactly.
Well, we can delete that one then,
Yeah, that might actually,
okay.
Which one, Stormwater Authority?
Stormwater Authority, page 5 of 12.
And then you had an amendment to the stormwater management plan definition.
Yeah, in addition to what was there, designed to control, the new would be the discharge of pollutants from impervious surfaces on on-site activity, as well as the volume and peak rate of surface runoff from a site on an ongoing basis after construction has been completed. So it's after the construction has been completed. What was changed was runoff, deleted was runoff, erosion, and sedimentation during pre-construction and construction-related land disturbance activities.
Wouldn't it be even more clear to leave the language you deleted and then add as well as the discharge after construction has been completed? And then it's really clear that it's pre-construction, construction, and post-construction.
And post-construction. Yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
That sounds good.
And then you have a definition for water course and then waters of the Commonwealth.
Yeah, again, because watercourse occurs in some language in the document. So watercourse is a natural or man-made channel through which water flows, or a stream of water, including a river, brook, or underground stream. Again, that comes from the annotated model code. And waters of the Commonwealth, all waters within the jurisdiction of the Commonwealth, including without limitation, rivers, streams, lakes, ponds, springs, impoundments, estuaries, wetlands, coastal waters, and groundwater, and waters of the United States as defined under the Clean Water Act, and so forth, as herein amended.
Well, I have no problem adding those two definitions. Does anyone else?
Okay.
Are we agreed to add those definitions?
Yeah.
Okay. So, boy, we've made tremendous progress. Richard, there was no danger that we would be voting on anything tonight.
I didn't hear you. I can't hear the no danger, there's what?
We would be voting on anything
Yeah,
tonight.
no danger that we'd be voting tonight.
We just got through the definitions.
Okay.
So I think this is a perfect place to stop. And the Section 4 applicability, may I encourage everyone to review what Emil has proposed, what I proposed, and I'm by no means married to what I have done, and take a look at the bylaws from some neighboring communities, and then if you have ideas of what should be in this section, please submit your written version to Patrick, so we will have the benefit of your thinking. And Bill, I know you have some really good ideas, so if you could put them down in writing so that we can see.
Let me ask a more general thing about
Sure.
applicability, which is the current bylaw makes this distinction between larger and smaller projects.
That's the regulations do that. The regulations do that, not the bylaw.
Okay, so, yep, that's rules and regulations. Okay. It doesn't look like there's any difference in the procedures between larger and smaller projects. They all require a plan, they all require a set of guidelines, they all require a set of standards and BMPs. And so if we go back to the idea that Patrick says somebody wants to build a backyard, and, you know, if it's on 2-to-1 slopes, that might be a cause of concern. But the homeowner is going to have a lot of trouble meeting the smaller project standards under rules and regulations, in the sense of having all these engineering calculations done. It's going to, you know, cost him several $1,000s at least to come in and do this. I just don't know. I mean, I looked through trying to see what was different about smaller and larger, and it wasn't really clear to me, other than a size threshold.
Right.
Bill?
I
Well, there-
noticed the same thing.
there
But
is-
anyhow, we're dealing with the general bylaw, and so I really do encourage everyone to look at applicability. And we really, I think it's probably the most important section of the general bylaw, and we need to get that right so we
Okay.
don't.
No, I have some ideas. I think it really should depend, like Topsfield, on the amount of clearing you're doing, not on how much land you're doing the clearing upon.
Right. So,
If you're on flat land, it's like, okay, you know, clear what you want.
right.
And if you're on 2-to-1, it's like, nope, you really have to watch what you're doing. I don't care whether you're doing it in your backyard or whether you're doing it on a, you know, on a much larger lot or a much larger
Exactly.
project.
So what we'll start with Section 2, no, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Section 3.
Section 3, which I don't think needs any amendment, but we'll start with applicability at our next meeting. And so I think it's important that we move on with our agenda. So the next item on our agenda is the planning board's statement of position with respect to the Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. Emil has submitted a memorandum for our consideration, but I think, Emil, you did want to speak to the informal subcommittee that I formed, so.
Yeah, just as a matter of disclosure, that Rick and I were appointed as a subcommittee or a working group, and just a couple of weeks ago, I withdrew from the group. I think that whatever I can contribute, I think would be better as part of a board member than, you know, working individually or with the other group, directly with the consultants. So I chose to withdraw from that, so I'm no longer part of that working group. But my thought was that the planning board, I think...
Could I interrupt you, though,
Sure.
just for 1 minute? Because we will actually no longer have an informal subcommittee, I'm going to make the executive decision to disband that informal subcommittee. So, Rick, I know you've been involved with the folks at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary and have been meeting with Sean Farrell and the town manager as well as the consultants. So I want to make clear that that if you continue that involvement, that you are involved as a private citizen, and that at this juncture, the planning board will consider whether we want to adopt a position as the board. That's not to say members can't have an opinion any which way, but it will be as private citizens. And if the planning board wants to adopt a position, we will do it formally as a board. So,
Can I ask a question?
sure.
Why are you dissolving this subcommittee?
Well, because it's no longer a committee, it's just you. And I think that what we're,
Could appoint another person. Emil decided he just did not want to participate and resign. You've still got the single largest land development project in a generation planning board should be intimately involved, informed, and know what's going on. To just dismiss it and say, well, we're not going to be involved because Emil resigned, is, I think, would be a dereliction of duty.
No, I think we want to be very much involved, but I would hope that we're involved as a board, and maybe you could fill us in a bit about what transpired this evening. I can, let's just back up a little bit, and you can tell us what you have learned about the process. I mean, I only know that contracts were signed because I listened to the, just a bit of the select board's meeting last night. But so contracts have been signed?
Yeah.
We need a Madam Speaker.
I think you would need to go to,
Can you inform us what those contracts were?
There is a single contract that was signed with a combination of Gamble Associates and Barry Abramson Associates, who are going to do a strategic study of 3 months duration to look at the existing site, its topography, the buildings, their condition, the infrastructure, and look at potential uses concurrent with the structures and the infrastructure. It also incorporates a very vigorous public participation process. The meeting I was at tonight was exclusively with about 20 abutters who've organized and become quite knowledgeable about what's going on and have engaged with the seminary on their own. So this has now become a formalized process. Somewhere in early November, the next public meeting will be with all members of the public to solicit input on their questions, concerns, ideas about what potential development might look like or not look like on that site.
So the meeting tonight was more of an informal meeting than
Correct. It was, the abutters, as we discussed at the last meeting, if they do not feel like they've been participating, they've been allowed to have their concerns addressed, then this project is going to go nowhere. And the whole point of this process was to get both the seminary and the town engaged on the same footing, to engage in independent, objective expertise, and to look at the site objectively and independently and determine what the highest and best potential uses for the seminary in terms of rendering the value, but also how and what those impacts might be, and lay out some potential options for rezoning of that property consistent with the uses that both the public and the seminary and the consultants look at and come to a conclusion that might be the best potential uses. That's what we discussed about. And then at Emil's suggestion, we have, and I talked to the town manager and the chair of the select board, gotten Jonathan Whitten from KP Law on board, and who will be involved in this and monitoring this process, and so that he's up to speed, so that at the end of this, hopefully early January, mid-January, that he can come to the board and say, well, given what's occurred, this is what most likely would be a bylaw that encompasses the preferred uses by the seminary, by the town, and by the abutters, and by the public expression of their opinion. So, and I know at the last meeting, Marnie, you expressed some concern about the planning board being involved, but I think the planning board should be intimately involved, because this is not talking to developers that might be in front. We're talking to the seminary, We're hearing from an architect who specializes in redevelopment of public properties and institutional properties, opine on what potential uses might be, hear from the neighbors what they think will be appropriate up there, hear from the town officials what they'd like to see happen up there, so that everybody and the planning board knows what all the options are that are being discussed and conclusions that are being reached, so that when something comes before the planning board, you're up to speed. The planning board knows what's happening, knows what the process has been, and knows how the options were arrived at.
Right, and I agree with you on that front 100%. I guess my hesitation is that I don't know that the planning board can be intimately involved in determining how the zoning, whatever changes or whatever options are developed, because we shouldn't be formulating the code that we will then have to rule on. Do you follow me?
Well,
That's a real conflict. So I think that we can certainly be involved in learning about what's going on and express opinions as to what the planning board thinks would be appropriate considerations that the consultants should be focused on. But I don't know that we should get too deeply involved in the actual bylaw, what it would look like, because we're the ones who have to determine whether it should be adopted following a public hearing. So,
He didn't say that, though.
No, he didn't say that. He said, be involved.
Yeah.
But at some point, the ultimate point here is to develop a code of some sort, whether it's an overlay district or a new form of, a new type of bylaw, that will eventually come before us. So there's a point at which we can't be
Right.
developing a bylaw that we have to then say, we approve it. I mean, it really
No,
is.
I understand what your concern is, but the strategic plan is not to develop a bylaw. It's to develop a consensus about what development options would be preferable for all parties concerned. And that's as far as it goes. I mentioned, and I think Emil suggested, Jonathan Witten, monitoring the process, understanding the process, understanding how the options were developed, and then independently, he can advise the planning board, saying, what I've heard and seen from both the planning board, the abutters, town officials, the seminary, the likely and best approach would be an overlay, whatever vehicle makes the most sense. I'm thinking the involvement of the planning board is crucial because this is on a fast track. There's no doubt about it. So it wouldn't serve the planning board well to have you guys working in isolation and just this whole thing's happening, but you don't want to hear or know about it because of potential conflict. I want everybody to be totally up to speed, totally informed on what's happened and how it got to this point, so that you feel comfortable that it reflects the best of what can happen in a complex public nonprofit decision-making process about uses on that property.
Well, then why don't we just have you as a ex officio member of this group and report back every other week, whenever it's appropriate, to tell us, in fact, what's going on, so that we don't get blindsided
Right.
3 months from now when they say, well, this is what we've decided, and, here are all the zoning changes that we recommended. We go, Whoa.
Right, that's exactly what I want to avoid,
Right.
is they're talking about, the consultants are talking about scheduling a general public meeting. I suggested at the community house, because tonight we had like 20, and my guess, even if you did a wide advertising, you might get 50 or 60 people there. Is that the planning, individual planning board members can attend and voice their individual opinions, not planning board opinions, or ask questions, or observe the process and make suggestions, have input as individual planning board members. But I'm happy to report on this process as needed.
It would be helpful, I think it would be helpful for me, I guess, I understand the general concept of what's part of this study, but I think if there's been a contract award, there would have been a very specific outline of scope, objectives, and deliverables. It'd be helpful to understand, I think, from my perspective anyways, before determining what the level of involvement of the appropriate participation is, it'd be understand exactly what the Abraham and Associates and Gamble Associates have been contracted to do. Because I think Emil's memo is good, it's like outlining some goals for development, but what's this should have been before the contract got awarded. I mean, these are like what you hope to foster in the development, whereas these guys are going to go in.
Hi, Sandy. Yes, I am home.
Excuse me, would it be possible?
Yes, I'm here.
When did you get home?
Jameson.
Oh, last night.
Oh, last night.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, this is Tuesday already.
Right.
Yeah.
This is the
Yeah.
Conservation Commission.
A day of catching up and getting
I
things
think we've overlapped.
I'm
together.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last time the kids came over in the afternoon.
Excuse me.
It's just a guy who's,
It sounds like somebody's off mute again.
Yeah,
Um,
so,
And I wrote to Leslie, and I've
Whoever
been
is
trying
speaking,
so
would you
hard to
please put
get
yourself
my
on
Dropbox
mute?
I think it's Steve Jameson.
Tricia said she
Yeah,
had nothing
Stephen
to do with it.
right,
And,
right.
To the party that is on this conference call, can you please mute yourself?
I can't even find my Dropbox, so
I don't know if they can hear us.
I don't know how to tell.
They obviously
excuse
can't.
me,
if
Mr.
it's done or
Jameson,
Yeah.
Would
Would it be possible for you to mute
And she said that.
your Zoom?
Do you know who's
Let me see what
speaking?
she
he's probably
said.
muted us.
She said she did something.
Yeah, because I can see Virginia, and that's
That's her voice.
That's her
That's
contact.
her voice.
Yeah,
You get to the one that she said she did something.
Virginia.
I just logged into my mom's Dropbox and removed your access.
We need to go back to a
That folder.
webinar concept if this is going to happen.
I don't know what that
Well,
means.
usually you
Well, that's
can,
probably-
it's very
Completely.
strange, you can't.
From your Dropbox in order to have that reflected on your app. I suggest logging out and
We
back in
can't
again.
turn
I
off
can't even
that volume.
find how to log into
Oh, is there any way to turn it down?
Dropbox.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
To see if
Oh,
it
that's when
actually
you
is
don't
empty.
hear
Before it was all
Oh.
full, and I couldn't do anything, and it had S. Jamison, he was the only person who could open it, who could get rid of it, and that wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't me, because I never put this there, so I couldn't figure it out.
yeah.
After trying, she told me to forward it to Joshua, but I thought Joshua was not answering, so I'll try Leslie. She's good.
2020,
Uh-huh.
all these years, except that we have this kind of.
Yeah,
One of these computer things, you know.
I didn't come to the.
yes, yes.
I wasn't voting not to be.
I'm sorry, I don't know enough about it.
People weren't around.
I don't know enough about it either. All I know is that
Just for
I
spot,
keep
we'll
getting
bring your file.
messages, your Dropbox is too full, you need to order, you need to pay
Right,
money, get another one,
right.
get a bigger one. I don't even
Can
use
those
Dropbox.
people speaking
What
hear me?
Dropbox that I have.
Can the people speaking hear me?
Now their phone's sitting over on the,
Yeah.
Oh,
Doesn't
really?
have any of these pictures in it of Grace,
I don't think they can hear us.
Grace's
No.
birth,
No.
early days.
And it's not.
Yeah,
Whoever
Kick
put
them out of
them
the
there,
meeting.
I don't know.
yeah, yeah,
Is there a way we can
Anyhow,
disconnect
that's just
them?
computer
Are
thing.
you able to mute
yeah.
anyone on
yeah.
your end?
Well, if you can find it,
Patrick can sign in as.
what I would like to do is, because I
Yeah,
can't
can
solve
we,
the
like,
problem.
Get out and restart.
I would like to just get you a year's subscription to storage capacity so that you don't run out of space. That you have more space than you could ever use.
To be able to turn off.
That's the other
I don't
solution.
really use it. I mean, it's only that other people put my picture, who put pictures in there. I
So
never
you
put
don't,
pictures in there.
you don't look to it for pictures.
Maybe we should request
Only when somebody
of
tells
this
me to.
committee between
Tells me there are
the school
pictures there to look at.
and the selectmen,
Somebody else put them
that they
in.
keep us
And
informed
I thought they were
of
for
all
40th anniversary, but no, it
contract,
turns out they
of
do.
any
about
plans that
maybe
are, of any plans that are produced, sketch planning, that we have sort of milestones and benchmarks.
Right.
But they keep
You
doing
know,
it in
even if
my
we
box,
don't
and I wasn't
engage in
allowed to
all the
remove it.
decision-making,
Somebody else had the permission to remove
if we're
them.
kept abreast,
And, that
anytime
was
any
what I was trying to
paperwork,
find
let's
out.
put it that way,
Who
anytime
had
any
the
paperwork
permission?
is created,
Yeah.
whether it's a plan or a contract or an agreement or
I
whatever,
don't
Lot of
generally
communication is
use
important.
you know, that we are
Dropbox
kept
because
abreast.
Right.
I go to the
Then we can
family
make a motion
website
here
for pictures.
Right,
request
right.
Look at
that
them there, and that's all I.
from the town manager, or
really
the
know
town
about.
manager
Yeah.
and the select.
Well, I wish I knew more about it, but I don't, I'm sorry.
Is there nothing we can
that's
do?
okay. I will respond to Leslie and say, how do I log now?
Does anybody
now
have their personal
can't log
contact
into
information?
Dropbox, so tell me how to do that.
I don't
Yeah.
think
She will, she's so good.
Yeah,
She knows all about everything with computers.
she's very
And Laura knows
fascinating.
everything about phones.
Yes, it's a good thing we have them to rely on. I know, it's a good thing we have them to rely on.
Mr.
Yeah.
Jameson, can you hear the
Younger
meeting?
Generation.
We'll definitely
Yep,
do the
yep.
webinar next time.
Yeah. Well, I hope you get that sorted out.
If we're not having,
Oh, yeah, it just becomes, it
Open public
pops up
hearing.
every so often telling me, you know, about
Rob,
being
as a
out of
host.
space and better do something.
Right,
So
right.
I get tired of seeing that.
Rob,
Yes, I know.
That's what
right.
made me think about doing
Lose
something
Robin
about it.
Only the host
Yeah.
mute
Yeah.
if he's not lined up.
I'm glad you're back, and it was a
Well,
good
thank
trip.
you, yes, yes, it was a fine trip, yeah, no problems.
webinar.
not public hearing,
Tried 3 times.
Yeah,
should be webinars.
They
come
have
back
to,
to all sorts of mail and stuff like
they
that.
have
you
to
know.
all be
I
webinars.
know, yeah,
Right.
even
Public
3
hearing,
days.
and you wanted
4
an
days
open
to
meeting.
file something.
Oh, I know.
It's a webinar.
So how was your day?
I can ask
How were you
Robin
up
whether
to?
we can just end this and conduct the rest of our
Yes.
business without the public
Oh,
input, because
one of
we
the
can't do
chores
anything.
was cooking a whole batch of chicken that I bought yesterday, and
I know, but
unfortunately,
we can't even
my
conclude
first
the
PT
meeting.
appointment, I thought it was at 2 o'clock.
We can't have a
Marty,
motion
who's
to
the
adjourn.
host of the meeting?
The chicken
Someone should
wasn't
be able
done,
to
and I
mute
asked Evie to
What?
sit down.
Patrick doesn't have his login. I think they changed his
Oh.
I
login
came back to
credentials.
find this crispy chicken.
Oh,
Oh, my goodness.
Robin, is there a way we can just
Got it dried up.
terminate
Yeah.
this and continue our
Yeah.
Never
meeting?
came down.
We're not
No,
voting on anything other
you
than
would
to
need to-
adjourn.
Right.
You would need to just continue the meeting.
She wouldn't forget it, 15 minutes, but she did.
You mean,
Yeah, no, it's,
we can't continue the meeting because we can't even
Is
hear each
anyone
other.
able to get a hold of Mr. Jameson otherwise?
Yeah.
Back in 2
Getting
weeks.
milk. I
We'll
don't
have to
usually
adjourn.
use it.
Meeting
I
to
go to
adjourn.
Aldi's
I just have a question. Is there a way, and is it appropriate for you to tell us when there's these meetings happening, and if any of us want to participate, that we could attend?
I don't find it
Oh,
much
absolutely.
better.
Because I agree with you. I think there can be a lot of information that could be helpful if we attend that would make this process faster. So if I'm available, I can go. I might not be able to go to everything.
oh,
What
my.
is-
The planning board.
No, that's fine. And
That seemed to take up a lot.
I think the board, should make a motion to request of the town manager.
Are you not able to
anything-
mute
any
him on your end?
paperwork produced by the committee, plans, contracts, be circulated to the planning board.
It would be helpful if we had a copy of the
No, a
signed
copy of that
contracts and see
contract. I'd
what-
like to see what are they up to?
Better online than in a magazine.
Uh-huh.
So I was
And
reading.
would you be able to email the planning board and let us know about meetings, or how would we find out about the meetings? 'Cause
Really?
obviously you had a meeting today, so I just,
Yeah, they haven't even set a date.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And I can move through an article. I always love to read the
Okay.
views, because they're what
It'll be on the town manager's report.
always have interesting
Send you an
thoughts.
email that I make this request.
It's a long article.
Go to all boards,
Yeah,
CPA,
yeah.
planning board, conservation.
Well, that's good that you can read them better on the
Get
computer.
copies of paperwork.
Yeah. and
Yeah, and get
bigger
the copies
print
of
as it moves
contract.
along, and- Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd get a
you know,
heads
with
up.
that
on it.
said,
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Do you want me to make a motion to adjourn?
Yeah,
Or what is this,
Oh, that's
figuring it
good.
out?
Yeah.
Can we hear each other
that's good.
well enough?
I'm sorry about your chicken.
Wait,
That's okay. It's boxed up and it is what it is.
Yep. Yep,
It
those.
is what it is. It'll be good tea. It'll just be a little bit tough and crisp. Don't have quite the nice thought.
Barney, if you're not able to mute Mr. Jameson, I think
Oh, yeah.
unfortunately, you might want to consider adjourning the
Yeah.
meeting.
It'll be chicken, you know.
Unless there's
Don't
another
hurt
way to
your-
get a hold of
don't hurt
me.
your teeth
I'll
on
have
it.
tea.
We can't hear.
5 weeks now, I'll have tea.
Well,
Yeah,
So I'm getting
we
ready.
have
the
an
host of the
informal
meeting?
consensus that we will
yes,
obtain
just
all
don't break
written
the teeth on
materials,
something
all
like caramelized
notices of
chicken.
future meetings.
No, I
And
will
so,
have to
you know,
firm
we will
dentures
continue
once I
to
get them.
designate you
Yeah.
as the point person. But then
Yeah.
other members
I
of
hadn't
the
expected
planning
to buy
board
it,
can
but I saw
attend
it was a good
if
price
they
for it.
have the inclination and the time to do so. And
This is the
with
poultry
that said,
disaster.
I think we have no alternative but to adjourn.
eggs have been
And to
quite
say
high.
that
have
I'm
they? Uh-huh.
disappointed that we
Pennsylvania
cannot
big
finish
thing
our
with the-
agenda
with the
is an
poultry
understatement. And to
supplier.
say I'm annoyed that this
So-
happened in 2022
Yeah.
after
You may
all
not have
this
been aware of how many
is
chickens had to
kind
be
of
killed.
troubling as
No, I
well.
wasn't, no.
So I guess
All
I
the
have no
chickens
alternative but to
across
entertain a
the
motion to
country
adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a
Oh,
second?
no. Oh, no.
So, excellent way.
When I call your
Yeah.
name, would you
And
please
I
indicate whether or not
way,
you
because normally, you know,
approve
now
of the
it's coming
motion?
on the market
Jonathan
because
Poor,
they've had a
Aye.
chance to grow
Bill
the chicken.
Wheaton,
Aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Aye.
Rick
But,
Mitchell,
It was really
Aye.
a disaster.
Well,
Richard Boroff,
Aye.
Here in
Beth
Pennsylvania,
Hur.
had
Aye.
hen
Marty
houses. I
Crouch,
know
aye.
it's not a good way to grow, to have